We bought 3.5 acres in what was advertised as a community of peace. What we got was a community of armed, entitled boomers and a utility easement that felt more like a contested battlefield. We were camping 600 feet off the main road, a perfect, isolated spot. And somehow, they found us. A truck pulled up, tires spitting gravel, and two very armed neighbors stood waiting. 15 minutes of pure, sweat-soaked diplomacy. I tried to de-escalate a situation that felt less like neighborly chat and more like a paramilitary standoff over property lines. They claimed this utility easement, the path for the water company, was their nature trail. They believed that because they walked it, drove on it, and parked in it, they had somehow earned permanent ownership rights. Anytime we questioned their presence, the parked vehicles, the constant loitering, we were met with a shrug and the chilling mantra, "You have a right to be there. So deal with it." We realized the problem wasn't just their presence, it was that they thought mere habit created a prescriptive easement. They were wrong. We had to consult a real estate attorney. He pointed out the fatal flaw in their claim: they never filed any formal paperwork. It was all just casual trespassing. But here's the kicker, the real leg sweep: they were unknowingly interfering with a pre-existing easement agreement between the out-of-state owner and the water company. The utility company's attorney looked into it, confirmed no one in the HOA had a claim, and basically told us to go get our own lives. We mutually agreed to put up a gate and formally informed the HOA board, "Stay off our property." 2 lawyers assessed it, and they all agreed we could fuck right off. For a while, it was peaceful. We breathed easy. But suburban peace rarely lasts, it just waits for the next petty violation to occur. We spotted what looked like ATV tracks on the easement. It felt wrong, out of place. So, we put a game camera back up. Less than a month later, our fears were realized. Someone was back on the easement. And it wasn't just random wandering. Enter the culprit, an at-large member of the board of directors. I genuinely don't know what that means, but it seems to grant him immunity from common sense. One day, he decided he needed to drive his personal ATV up to the utility water tower just to see what was going on. My wife saw him after he returned from his little excursion. He spotted us, paused, and muttered, "Oh great, now they're taking pictures of me." He clearly hadn't seen the camera. When he drove back down, my wife was just a few feet off the path. She extended her hand, a universal gesture of "Hey, stop and talk," and made eye contact. But he didn't stop. He 100% ignored her, kept driving, and treated the entire interaction like an inconvenience to his ATV ride. I had a brutal work week. Dealing with the sheer, exhausting pettiness of HOA disputes was not high on my list of priorities until this morning. I finally called the non-emergency number to report another instance of trespassing. It felt monumental, like calling in an army over a discarded lawn gnome. 3 or 4 hours later, a deputy from a neighboring county called back. His response was pure bureaucratic dismissal: "Sorry bud, can't help. It's a civil matter." I immediately pushed back, citing constitutional and discriminatory issues. How can protecting my property be contingent on paying a $100 filing fee? I demanded to know how to get him criminally trespassed. That was the pivot point, the moment the bureaucratic gears finally started turning. The deputy explained the necessary procedure. I had to tell him I wanted my neighbor trespassed, and specify the duration of the ban. I asked, "Great. Can I make this permanent?" The deputy immediately started trying to talk me out of it, suggesting we have a man-to-man conversation. I stood my ground. Despite numerous attempts to get me to back down, I held firm on the permanent trespass order. The deputy, after much deliberation, called my neighbor/board member at large directly to inform him of his permanent trespass status from our property. To top it all off, the yearly HOA meeting was coming up, and naturally, they planned to address this monumental event in front of everyone present. I never knew that achieving a definitive, legal victory could feel so profoundly awful. It's an anticlimax wrapped in paperwork. I feel genuinely bad that it came to this, that a simple dirt path required legal warfare and police intervention. But I also had to ask myself, when would it have stopped otherwise? Would we have been trapped in a cycle of passive-aggressive warnings and property line arguments forever? This whole ordeal boiled down to a simple, beautiful truth: the easement belonged to the utility company, not to the collective sense of entitlement held by 12 people in beige polo shirts. It was the law, the utility contract, and the sheer weight of professional legal opinion that finally dismantled their self-appointed sovereignty over our property. They called themselves a community. But what they were really running was an extremely petty, self-policing fiefdom built on shared resentment and HOA bylaws. The mental energy spent arguing over tire tracks and parking spots could have been used to, I don't know, actually enjoy the 3.5 acres we bought. We learned a valuable lesson about real estate law, but more importantly, we learned how much patience one person can muster when dealing with institutionalized pettiness. The easement remains functional, clean, and importantly, off-limits to any recreational vehicle driven by a man in an expensive polo shirt. We got our peace back. It wasn't a dramatic cinematic moment, it was just quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes after exhausting all legal options. The saga of the easement is now filed away under things I will never talk about at Thanksgiving. A suburban legend, if you will. I still laugh, sometimes, thinking about the initial confrontation, the pistols, the gravel, the profound sense of being judged by strangers. Prescriptive easement, utility agreement, at-large board member, it's all just enough specialized vocabulary to make you feel inadequate and compliant. It taught me that sometimes, fighting for your property rights feels less like justice and more like a deeply draining performance art piece. Saying no to their perceived rights, backed by 2 layers of legal authority, was the most satisfying and terrifying thing I've done in years. It proves that sometimes, the most powerful tool in the modern neighborhood conflict is not a picket sign, but a non-emergency police number. That permanent trespass notice is going to be the most ridiculous, yet satisfying, piece of paper I've ever received. They were focused on pipes and water flow, we were focused on who got to park their golf cart where. A perfect satire of human priorities. The silence now is the best part. It's the sound of legal boundaries being respected, finally and permanently. Those little cameras are not just for wildlife, they are modern instruments of suburban justice and accountability. My takeaway? Never assume that common sense or tradition outweighs the letter of the law, especially when dealing with utility easements.